Uh, I just wanted to thank everyone for joining Inside Grants today. We took a summer pause last month in July, and we're getting back going as the federal fiscal year comes to an end and as we move into the fall. I know my family was dealing with back to school today. Today was the first day for our kids, and I bet that life is bringing all sorts of new events and new starts as we go into August and into the fall. Today's webinar is going to focus on the federal fiscal year end. We generally call it a survival guide, but we're going to break down all the things that tend to happen at the end of the federal fiscal year or September 30th. And we're going to talk through the types of policies and controls, the questions that you need to be thinking about as you consider federal fiscal year closeout or year-end activities. My hope is that we'll be able to address a lot of questions today as they come available, and that there'll be good opportunity for discussion. The slide deck as far as content is a bit smaller today to encourage that, but let's go ahead and get started. So for those of you who don't know Team DWC that well, it was started in 2020. I'm Aaron Taylor, and I joined in 2025 after leaving federal service. I was most recently at the Administration for Community Living as part of the U.S. Health and Human Services. Prior to leaving federal service, I had 14 years of federal grant management experience and supervision roles across 5 different agencies. And I'm actively working with Team DWC and a variety of different federal grantees to provide primarily fiscal support, but also uniform guidance expertise. Just a tiny bit more about me. I've spent a lot of time with federal government. I know monitoring work, fiscal, programmatic, and administrative inside out. And I actively work with organizations right now and doing actual monitoring, doing compliance reviews, helping optimize and work on process improvement. If you have specific questions, happy to answer them today, but would also be open to meeting afterwards and doing a follow-up. We always start off our presentations with a reminder about 2 CFR 200 or the uniform guidance. When I was at HHS, we were in the process of moving from 45 CFR 75 to 2 CFR 200. So pretty much all the grantees that we're working with now across the federal grant space are all under the uniform guidance at 2 CFR 200. It's got 6 subparts, and this is your baseline requirements or regulations for all federal grant funds. We always encourage you to use 2 CFR 200 on the ECFR webpage. This is the official record and booklet, digital booklet of 2 CFR 200. There are some other resources out there. Mainly, a lot of people might use the Cornell website, and I'll say that is pretty good, but it can have some errors at times. So we recommend using ECFR. Before we get going with the content slides today, I wanted to see if we could get some things going in the chat. And this is a 2-part question. As we approach the end of the federal fiscal year, September 30th, 2026, what are your top priorities? And what do you see as your biggest challenges? And I'll take a minute for anybody who wants to respond in the chat. I hope to address these questions or speak to them as we're going through. Or we can always come back to them at the end. And again, if anybody wants to put that into the chat, or if you want to come on and speak verbally, that's great. This will just help with framing as we go through the slides to make sure we address. That's a big question, right? Thanks, Ricky Lee. That's a big question. Will federal fiscal year 2027 be allocated? I wish I had the crystal ball for that one. My assumption is let's assume yes on that one, because it seems like things are going to go towards continuing resolution. All right, Becky, this is your first time dealing with federal fiscal year end. So we're going to talk about that, right? What is someone who's new to the organization or new to this role? What do they do? Thank you for those who put it to the chat. I'm going to keep an eye on the chat as we go through and see if other questions come in. And also there'll be a time at the end to go through further questions. So I want to start with a framing slide. And this is looking at a variety of different factors that come into play at the end of a federal fiscal year, and put these out as kind of self-assessment questions to you and your organization to gauge where you are in your understanding of what you need to be doing, and if you are compensating for competing factors. The one thing I love to start with is timelines, because not all organizations that receive federal funds function on a federal fiscal year calendar. Particularly their own fiscal year may differ, and it maybe more often not aligns with the state fiscal year ending on June 30th or July 31st. Or it could be based on the calendar year, and that would be ending on December 31st. So if you have other timelines that are different than the federal fiscal year, how do you work in co-managing those timelines to make sure that you are, not losing track of an award timeline as you respond to federal fiscal year end requirements and deliverables. For programs, this timeline spill over into programs. If you have programs on different timelines or from different funders, how do you co-manage those and keep them going and keep them active as you're dealing with closeouts and deliverables on awards that end or that have a marker ending on the federal fiscal year end date? When you think about your roles and how you have to respond to financial or programmatic reporting, how do those differ if you're the prime recipient or the subrecipient? And where do you go to learn more information about what's required of a specific program? Does it actually have deliverables that are due at the end of the federal fiscal year, or are you working on a different budget period or a different timeline? I just wanted to acknowledge that Lucy put a question into the chat. Why do they need to get carryover so early towards the end of the project period? Because it's unsure about what the amounts are that are actually going to carry over. And we'll speak to that and what your rights are under the uniform guidance and how you could potentially push back a little bit against states or funders that are requesting this of you as a subrecipient to ensure that your reporting and particularly your projections of funds available the next year are accurate and supported. As we transition back to the slides and we're thinking about things your organizations coming down into reporting, this is a great segue, right? So as you get to a federal fiscal year end date, and particularly if you're getting to the end of the budget period or the project period, what are your expectations as far as reconciling programmatic impacts and use of federal funds? Are these reports considered interim, as in the project period or budget period still going, or are they final? The project period's done, you're at the final budget period. And do you know where you have to submit these reports? I know that Becky indicated that she's new to doing this work. One of the most important things to have when you come on board And ideally this would be in program policy or process, is what systems you need to utilize to complete reporting or deliverables for the end of the federal fiscal year, and how you get access to those systems, and what user roles you need. Lastly, going back to Lucy's comment, what are the types of actions that you're actually dealing with at the federal fiscal year end? Are they closeouts, either budget period or project period? Are they carryover? Are they extensions? Or are they something else? And we'll talk about some of those other program-specific types of requirements. When we talk about due dates and timelines, they're initially coming from 2 CFR 200. And again, these are the baseline requirements. They set the baseline timeline for all federal grants. The only way that these change is if there is program-specific requirements or statutory requirements that establish different markers. If we're talking about closeout, and particularly project period closeout, so this is the end of an award period, as the prime, if you are the recipient of the award, you have up to 120 days to close out the award. And this includes submitting financial reports and performance reports. If you're the subrecipient, you have up to 90 days to do your part of closeout, including submitting financial reports and performance reports. Particularly if you're a subrecipient and maybe you're working through a state pass-through, who is the prime or the recipient of the funds, and they have timelines for closeout or reporting that are shorter than these, ask them, what are the driving factors for doing this? Usually the prime or the pass-through wants to have the maximum amount of time to reconcile all the information so they aren't squeezed. They don't, they would prefer not having the difference between 120 or 90 days, which is 1 month. But the core regulations allow you substantial time, and this might be needed if you have a lot of different subcontractors or pending invoices, because you want to maximize your reimbursement of allowable costs. So as I mentioned, as we drive down into financial reporting and performance reporting, they use those same general closeout markers of 90 and 120 days. Where we start to see differences is if it's an interim report. So this might be a budget period closeout, or this could be year 1, year 2 of a 3-year project period. If you're doing an annual report, you get up to 90 days for submission, and this is generally for the prime. And then if you're doing a quarterly or semi-annual report, you get up to 30 days submission. And this would be generally submission of whoever's doing the standard form 425. These same dates apply to whatever the standard is for performance reporting for the specific program. One of the other common pieces might be a no-cost extension or an NCE. This is a period of performance change. Usually entities are seeking out 12 months because that's the maximum. In most cases, I would not recommend you taking a smaller amount unless you're incredibly sure that you can complete whatever work or whatever program work's required to complete in that period of time. The reason I don't recommend taking a smaller period of time is it's a one-time no-cost extension, so they can't extend an extension. And sometimes things just don't work out. The subcontractor works slow, the invoicing slow, and then you miss out on the funds or the opportunity to complete the work you're intending to do. So when I was at ACL, particularly for the programs in which we approved no-cost extensions, we always did a blanket 12 months. And this is 12 months from the previous project period or period performance end date. The Uniform Guidance Minimum Standard is to submit by no later than 10 calendar days before the end of the project period. I will tell you, every agency I've worked in tends to use a 30 calendar day standpoint. as their baseline for getting a request in. And I will say this is generally needed because it takes a long time to get processing through the systems and all the signatures in place if you actually want an extension, and this is an amended grant agreement by September 30th. And that's really the thing you want in hand before September 30th, so you can feel confident that you'll have those funds available to continue working the project from October 1 on. So when we talked about timelines and this idea of what if your fiscal year is different than the federal fiscal year, I mentioned about driving factors like the state fiscal year and aligning with that. Maybe you're using the calendar year, or maybe you have awards from other institutes, other agencies, foundations that are in different timelines. Big question is, what do you do to manage these timelines? One big thing that I recommend when working directly with clients is to have a master calendar. The other thing is just being intentional with policies, processes, systems, and controls. And when we talked early in the year about our monitoring and common audit finding webinars, we always come back to these, 4 areas of compliance. You have to have policies in place to say how you're doing things and why you're doing them. You have to have processes to implement all the work of the award. You have to have systems in place, digital systems to manage the records and the work you're doing. And you have to have controls, checks, and balances in place to ensure that you have proper oversight of the programmatic work and fiscal management. Having intentionality in these components is incredibly key to federal fiscal year and activities, and ensuring that you're meeting all the requirements of your specific awards, right, and program objectives. So if you're wondering if your program or award varies from the baseline closeout requirements or year-end requirements in 2 CFR 200, we recommend that you start with the grant agreement. That's the first place you should go to get specifics about your program and what may be required of you at the federal fiscal year end. If you don't see helpful information there, the other documents you can go to are term and condition documents. Sometimes these are built in as attachments into your notice of award or grant agreement, and sometimes they're standalone separate documents that are hosted on an agency website. We're working with grantees right now that get funding from NIST, and NIST hosts the terms and conditions for this specific program as a 25-page standalone document that's updated intermittently and hosted online. It's online and in place for all states and all primes and subrecipients to reference, and it's linked through a hyperlink in the award documents and would be in the subrecipient agreements passed down through each state pass-through. You can also look for any email updates from funders. You can look at program guides or handbooks. For example, HHS has a grant policy statement. National Institutes of Health has their own grant policy statement, providing clarifying information about managing a grant and deliverables. And if you're new in the position at your organization, you've not done this work before, look to the past records, right? And the past work done by the organizations to help frame and influence what's expected of you moving forward. But also, go back to these programmatic documents we've talked about in reference, because they're going to give you the most up-to-date information. A really good example of this is with HHS awards and ACL awards. They've moved from 45 CFR 75 to 2 CFR 200 over the last couple fiscal years, which has changed a lot of the underlying baseline requirements and regulations, extending closeout timelines, changing indirect cost rates and procurement. So a lot of those key factors that you need to adjust for future years and the most recent years are reflected in the notice of award and or attached terms and conditions. So I talked a lot about this term of prime and sub. So a prime is also called the recipient. This is the organization that directly receives the federal grant funds. They can function as a sole user, as in their organization uses all the funds. They might have some contractors, but they're not doing subawards. The prime can also function as a pass-through, and a pass-through is someone who gives money through to subrecipients or to substantive contractors. Subrecipients would be more common, and these are entities, working around the state to implement the program on the ground in different service areas, communities, or regions. They receive federal funds through the prime as a subaward, and this is in line with 2 CFR 200, 331, and 332. If the prime is a sole recipient, then they just follow all the rules and use their own organizational accounting and program tracking to pull together information for the deliverables. If they're doing pass-through, the big thing is that they have to wait on getting all the information from their pass-through entities before summating or accumulating all of that information to bring it together into the final reports and deliverables required by the funder. If we step down to a subrecipient, again, they could be the sole user, which means they just control reporting within their organization and funnel it up to the pass-through. They could also have further pass-through functions, which again means they have a network of organizations in which they have to collect information and data and documentation from before they can push things up to the prime organization or the lead pass-through entity. So the biggest thing to know is that if you are doing some form of pass-through, is that you need to prioritize getting the information from your organizations as quickly as possible and as completely as possible, so you have the most time to bring those together and organize the data and information and documentation and support into the deliverables requested or required by the funder. The most common federal financial report submitted by the recipient of the grant funds is the standard form 425 or federal financial report. Many federal awards have budget periods or project periods that end on September 30th. I know when I was at ACL, we had about 3,000 to 4,000 reports coming in for September 29th or September 30th from a variety of different organizations. If you were a subrecipient, we just talked about how information will flow up to the prime recipient, and then they will cumulatively or bring the data together cumulatively and report it in a single SF425. If you are a sole user organization, right, thankfully you don't have to deal with accumulating all the pass-through information, and you will just build a 425 from your organizational records. You can't emphasize enough at having been someone who's done a lot of compliance reviews on grantees and done a lot of deep monitoring. Showing return on investment, demonstrating good stewardship is one of the most important tenets of successful grant management, and really being able to tie together with intentionality where the data comes from, how it was summated, and then what was the source information to complete a 425. Incredibly important, and too often, kind of taken for granted. So I can't emphasize enough to really have the supporting documentation, processes in place to ensure accurate, complete, and documented financial reporting. The 425 or potentially the federal financial report that you're submitting as a subrecipient up to your pass-through is often going to collect additional information besides your direct use of federal grant funds. The most common information it's going to collect is cost share, right? So this is anything about match and leverage or possibly using program income as cost share. These requirements are going to come out of the program statute and should be included in your notice of award or grant agreement. The biggest thing to remember with cost share and match is that if you're co-managing funds for multiple years, potentially under two different notices of awards, that you need to be intentional with your assignment of cost share, right? So be careful of duplicatively recording cost share. Make sure that each dollar or valuation of a dollar is intentionally attached to a specific award. Same thing for program income. Program income and where you attribute that program income needs to be award or grant number specific. Also, you need to know the method in which program income is treated. There's three different options under the uniform guidance. There's deduction, where program income reduces the amount of federal funds you receive. Additive, where program income is added to the amount of federal awards you receive. And cost share, where program income is used to meet a cost share or match requirement. Again, your notice of award, statutory requirements, or program guide will explain which method to use, and it's critical within your accounting to ensure award-specific reporting that you know the method and properly implement processes for that award or program within your accounting system. Lastly, indirect cost. If you're filling out the 425, this goes into box 11. You need to have policies in place at your organization for cost allocation and indirect cost, and you need to know your method. Do you have a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement? What is the period in which it's in effect? What is the rate for the period? What is your direct cost-based definition? If you're using the de minimis, how much of the 15% are you charging? Because the regulation says up to 15%. You have to apply it against the modified total direct cost definition, which means you have to exclude certain expenses such as rent. If you're directly charging rent, do you have the controls? Do you have the processes in place to ensure accurate charging of indirect costs? And are you appropriately applying it to each award for the period in which you're reporting on? I think I spoke to several of these key considerations for financial reporting as I was going through the prior information, but let's just reiterate them here. Always big if you have multiple awards, you need to maintain separate accounts or cost centers within your accounting system, specifically for each grant number. So if you receive program funds for housing and you get an award each year and it's got a 2-year project period, then you are going to have concurrent project periods. So you need to make sure that you have a cost center or sub-account set up for each grant number to specifically explain how expenses are incurred, what expenses are attributed to a specific award, right? And this goes for federal funds, this goes for cost share, program income, and indirect cost. You have to be able to give an expense a name. As we know, expenses can be allocated in whole or in part. According to the uniform guidance, this comes down to your policies, your processes, and internal controls to show intentionality in your record keeping. If there are unique requirements that come along with your program, let's say a really large match requirement, or a unique interpretation of program income, or maybe an admin cap that limits indirect cost, make sure you have flags and rules within your accounting system and potentially supporting program process documents that makes people aware of these internal controls and how your standard policies and procedures or standard SOPs have to change and be reactive to this more challenging requirement. Having these flags and checks and balances in place ensure that as people change through your organization or they move into new roles, that you continue to have the same control, same protections in place to properly use federal funds. Now, when we go from financial reporting into programmatic reporting, let's look at it from a standpoint of just classic question words: the when, how, what, where, and who. If you have program reporting due at the end of the federal fiscal year or at some point, a different date in the federal fiscal year, when is it happening? And you have to give information, you have to give data. How are you going to get that data? When you look at the notice of award of the program rules, what data and information is required and what format do you have to submit it in? Do you have to use a standardized report or template that the organization's provided? Or do you have to provide it in tabular fashion through a dashboard or in some other means? Where are you going to get all this information from, and where is the report being submitted? Particularly if it's in a federal system, do you have access to that system? Do you have employees that have active user accounts and the appropriate roles? And who, right? Can you define who at your organization has responsibility for collecting the data, submitting the data, and approving the data? This again comes back to the systems that you have to use or the formats you have to use, making sure you have specific roles assigned. Ideally, these would dial down into job description responsibilities so that there's internal controls, right, checks and balances, but also accountability within your organization to ensure that you meet all the federal fiscal year end requirements. So at the beginning, we talked about end of federal fiscal year actions and requirements and potential activities. So most common things that happen at the end of the federal fiscal year are budget period closeout. So you have multiple budget periods within a project period. So this is a closeout usually of a single year, which could have potential carryover implications, could have implications for continued work on the program or award. Maybe there are specific objectives, performance markers that you have to achieve. Project period closeout corresponds with the last year of the budget period, and this is a full closeout of the award, full reconciliation of performance and financial work. No cost extension, we mentioned before. This is an extension of the period of performance. This is more time to do programmatic work. A no-cost extension is not more time to liquidate or do financial reconciliation. If you need that, that is a separate process, and it's an extension of those 90 or 120 days we've talked about. But no-cost extensions, in the sense of period of performance extensions, it's additional time to do the work, right? Usually when you're seeking out a no-cost extension, you need to have intentionality and obligation within your budget, because no-cost extension periods are not times to de-obligate and re-obligate. It is time to implement specific obligated activities, and you just need intentional time, or additional time to achieve the objectives, outputs, and goals of your project. Carryover is a process of moving money from one budget period to the next. This could be federal funds. It could be excess program income. What you need to know is in your notice of award or in your program guide is what are the rules? What are the requirements? Do you have to do specific submissions? Do you have to give projections? What can you actually carry over? Is it grant funds? Is it program income? How long can you carry it over? And coming back to your own internal accounting, if you have multiple awards open, are you separately tracking those pots so that you can give a fair reconciliation of the funds that are actually eligible for a carryover action? Some other examples of end of federal fiscal year actions could include something like a maintenance of effort standard. If you have to have certain annual expenditure requirements under statutory provisions, there's potentially reconciliation of an administrative cap if you have admin caps in your program, or some programs I worked on at ACL had obligation deadlines, and this was within a project period. You had to demonstrate full obligation of the award by a certain deadline. So when we look at broader best practices for being ready for end of federal fiscal year, um, we encourage you to develop and maintain program overview summary sheets. These are usually in your appendix or an attachment to financial policies and procedures, and they would detail what are the baseline and continuing requirements, timelines, objectives that we have for the program, and if I'm reporting on it, what are the systems, what are the forms that have to be done, what are the deviations in our internal controls or standard processes, and who is actually doing the work on this. This can be positions most often, what positions within the organization are working on this award, and what are their general responsibilities as far as completing required deliverables. Um, if you don't have them, your policies and procedures, and this again is usually in your financial management policies and procedures, should have a grant award life cycle or grant award life cycle stages or processes component or subsection. And this talks about what you do when you get a new award, how you enter it into the financial system or into your accounting system, into your programmatic system. How do you implement appropriate and program specific controls? What do you do as far as prepping information for deliverables? And what are your general closeout processes? The last thing would be coming down to staff and making sure if you have these resources in place that you're educating staff that are involved on the programs that have specific federal end of federal fiscal year or financial or programmatic reporting requirements. And then as you get new staff on board, particularly ones that are coming in for someone who's been kind of doing this work solely for a long time, making sure you're working collaboratively with them to give them appropriate training so they can feel confident taking on these responsibilities and having assurance over successful submission of required deliverables. If you all need any help, need any support in this, we function a variety of different ways. One thing we can do broadly, and we're actively doing this with some organizations right now, is a readiness check and helping potentially close out programmatically or financially grants that are ending at the end of the federal fiscal year. And we can look more broadly at tweaks to internal controls, policies, processes, and systems to help make this easier in the future. Also are available to do education and training, personalized technical assistance, with the goal of grant award, continued grant lifecycle management just being commonplace so that when it comes to end of federal fiscal year and you're working on deliverables, it's just a natural extension of the work you're doing each day to be a good steward and achieve the specific program goals. We do have 2 upcoming webinars about program income and indirect cost. These are usually some of the more challenging topics when it comes to financially managing federal grants. So we'd love to have you come join us for those. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me at aaron@teamdwc.com. Be happy to answer those and to get some of the concern or pressure off your chest. Are there questions that I can come back around to now that we're at the end of the presentation part? And you're welcome to put any questions into the chat, or if you want to come off mute or need help coming off mute, happy to hear your voices. That would be wonderful.
Aaron, thank you for the presentation. It's very thorough, has the guidelines for us to follow. I currently don't have a federal grant, but I wanted to be prepared, hoping to have a federal grant by the end of the year. So
Great.
thank you.
Yeah, and if you just have any questions about setup, right, any reminders, feel free to reach out at that time. And I'm always happy to answer questions, right?
Yes.
Just simple questions just to get things going. Uh, that was my favorite part when I was in federal employment, and just that simple back and forth. And I want you to, feel like there's not an obligation, right? You can ask questions, and if it's something I can give a quick answer to, I will freely, share.
I do have a quick question. Like I
Yeah.
said, I'm hoping to get a federal grant by the end of the year, but I'm in a new organization, and so in my prior organization, we already had the system set up, and I had gotten
Hmm.
the login so that I could come into the federal grant award. How does that happen for a new organization coming into federal funding? Is that something that is processed after the grant award, or is that something that an organization can start setting up ahead of time?
Yeah.
Um,
So the two big things that you'll need is the grants.gov if they're using that for any of the application components,
correct.
right?
Yeah, I
Right.
already have
And then
that.
and then the other one big is having your UE and SAM up to date.
Yep.
Because if those aren't up to date, there'll be a flag to issue the award if you receive funding. So if you have those, that's all you can really do right now. Um, if once you get an award, they should have instructions as a new recipient on how to access a program system, could be grant solutions, could be a variety of them, and how to
Hmm.
handle the financial side. I will say if it's an HHS fund or someone else that's using payment management system, as soon as you get information about that, do it because new users take a long time to get in place for payment management system. And, that's your access to funds, right?
Right.
Uh, so also when you're setting up that, if you have an organization that has the size and fit for it, request, two users, right? To make
Mhm.
sure you have a backup so you have two people at the organization who can do drawdowns.
Okay.
Um, it might not be the best setup right now for you as an organization, depending on your size and shape, right? But it's so importantly critical
Hmm.
because if someone leaves or someone goes on extended leave, right, isn't
Hmm.
unavailable, it takes so long right now with the ID.me and other features to get a new user account in PMS that if you have cash flow issues, it's going to create
Hmm.
a strain.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. And, again, if that happens, if you just need like the markers, I've worked in a variety of different organizations. I'm familiar with a variety of different systems. Happy to give you some pointers.
Okay. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Yeah. Um, any other questions? And again, if they come up, as you go into September, you're thinking about, they just pop into your head at a different time, feel free to reach out. And I did want to just quickly come back to Lucy's question. I don't know the context. I don't know if you want to share some more information about the carryover and why you have to know so soon. My best guess here is that it's a state pass through and they want to know as soon as possible so they can go through their multi-tiered grant agreement process and try to get the correct number in place. Um, if you are worried about an inaccuracy or potentially losing funds, then I would make sure to um, ask them, right? What is the driving factor here? What is the risk if I don't um, provide you with a number by the state? And it looks like we've got one more thing. All right. So Amy, thank you. Um, if there are no other questions, uh, we'll go ahead and end early today. And I'll just say a big thank you for joining us. and hope to see everyone again in September.
Thanks.